I'm going to give you a short tutorial on a point-and-shoot camera, and I understand everyone's camera is different, but a lot of them have similar functions. They might just be labeled something slightly different. So on mine, of course, we have P, Live, Auto, and all these other things, movies, quiet shooting. The main thing is if you have a P, that means program, and you get to control some of the features of your camera. If you put it on auto, the camera or the guy in Japan that made your camera gets to control all of your settings, which I never like to do, so I normally keep mine on P. Okay, so we have the back of the camera here, and if you have a display button, you can turn on and off all these display icons up here. If it's not on the back, it should be somewhere in your menu. So look at your book to see if it has that. Okay, so of course up here we have 1648 is the number of photos I have left. This L with that quarter circle is large. That's the size of the image that you're taking. I always recommend to everyone to take every single photo at the highest resolution that your camera allows, because you can always make a photo smaller. You can never, ever make a photo bigger. That's the battery icon. That V for my camera, it's vivid. It's saying that it's vivid color. I'm not quite sure what that camera is. That there, the lightning bolt with the cross through it, is it's no flash. On the bottom right, the ISO is 400, and that little thing there, -1/3, I'm telling my camera that I want every photo that I take to be underexposed by 1/3 increment of light. Okay. So now on here we have, of course, the play icon, so I can see the last photo that I took. Okay, so if you have on your camera this plus minus thing somewhere, if you push that, this little thing on the bottom should come up. And then you can tell your camera if you want your photo to be brighter or darker. Now, of course, we know that there's the 3 ways to let light into your camera. The f-stop, the amount of light that comes in through the lens, the shutter speed, the duration of light, or the ISO, the film sensitivity to light. Well, if you change one of these to make your camera be darker or brighter, it's going to change one of those things. Okay, so for instance, for this photo, if I push my shutter halfway down, it tells me 640 at 2.8. Okay, now if I go the other way and take this one, everything has changed. 1000th at f8. So since you know those numbers and you're trying to get a slow shutter speed, you can tell your camera without exactly picking those numbers what you want it to be at by simply telling it to be brighter or darker. So of course, if you're telling your camera you want it to be brighter, you're probably going to be telling it to have a slower shutter speed. If you're telling it to be darker, it means your duration of light is less, you're letting less light in. So when you're thinking about your slower shutter speeds, that's a way that you can trick your camera. Okay, something else from here, of course. Okay, so if we point our camera to the sky, push our shutter halfway down, it's going to get an exposure reading from the sky. Now my shutter is still halfway down, so I can come down here, expose my shot, put that horizon at 1/3, take my photo. Okay, so now I have that nicely composed shot with the sky being that nice blue color. Okay, so on the other side of it, I can come down here, expose the light for those trees, and then come up and compose my shot, because maybe that's what I want it to look like. And that's the photo. Okay, so now if I look at these two, so that's exposed for the trees, that's exposed for the sky. Now is one right or wrong? Not necessarily. I just want to make sure you know you can always push your shutter button halfway down to expose for one of them. Or let's say, okay, we've got a tree here. We're going to push our shutter halfway down and expose for that tree, and then we can move our photo over here and then take it. Or vice versa. We're going to expose for the sky and then come over here and shoot with the tree in it and get that silhouette of the tree. So that's not a bad composed shot. But the main thing is that it's the way we're exposing the photo. Okay, a couple other things on here. If you didn't know the lightning bolt, is telling your camera if you want the flash to be automatic, if you want it to be on, slow, which means it'll flash and it'll have a slow shutter speed, or if you want it to be off all the time. And I know these first photos, we've told the camera to be off all the time. Okay, so we'll make sure that's off. On this one, we can push this flower button and it'll go to macro, infinity, or normal. So macro would be shallow depth of field, infinity would be a long depth of field, and normal would probably be somewhere in the middle. Okay, so also on here, if you have some sort of function button, these sorts of options will pop up. We've got our ISO, which we can pick what ISO we want. So for a day like today, I would want to put it on 80. The same as if you want a slow shutter speed, put your ISO as low as your camera allows, whether it's 80 or 100. Some cameras just say low on it. Our white balance just depends on the light situation. Today's a sunny day, so I can put it on sun or automatic. These are just different color settings. That's just your personal preference. That's how the scene meters, like I was saying with picking the sky or picking the background, it'll pick different things. This one's, it evaluates the entire scene. This one picks a single point based inside the frame. I just always, on all my cameras, leave it on this one. Okay, so now we have the sizes, if you want to pick a different size, but like I recommended earlier, I just keep mine on large and fine all the time. Okay, so for here, if we take the sky, 1/320th of a second at f8. Okay, so now if we go to a higher ISO, 1/1600th at f8. So all those numbers change based on each other. So if you change the shutter speed, your f-stop would change. If you change an f-stop, your ISO might change. So as you get familiar with those, it'll make a lot more sense what each one is. Also, something to realize with, if you ever have, let's see, a dark photo. Let me change my ISO. Okay, so we don't really have any light, hopefully. See that thing flashing in the bottom left? That means if you're hand holding your camera, there's going to be camera shake. And that's something that we don't want with these slow shutter speed photos. Also, if you see how there's that --4, that means that you're at a fourth or a quarter of a second. If it was 1--0, that means it's at a second of a shutter speed, which there's nothing wrong with that, depending on your lighting situation. So if our scene was this dark, and those were my settings, that I had ISO 80 at f2.8 at a slow shutter speed, what I would do is, see this little circle with a line through it? I can tell my camera to be a 10-second timer, a 2-second timer, or a custom one, and that just totally depends on your camera. Okay, so I'm going to do a 2-second timer because the 2-second timer is made for pushing the shutter down and you having it rest on a surface. So your finger has left the camera, you are no longer shaking the camera, and it's going to take the photo. 10-second one, of course, is for you running around to the front of the camera and taking the image. Okay, so what we would do if our scene was this dark, okay, so we would push the shutter down and let it take the photo. Okay, so now we have that photo. So it's a good exposure even though the scene was that dark. So that's a good way to work on doing those slow shutter speeds, and I'll show you a couple of those in, later today.